Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I'm going to be doing a direct comparison between the brand new ZT-0308 and the ZT-0303, which will stand in for any of the 0300 models. So, the reason I'm doing this is because this 0308, let me shimmy these around here. This 0308 is a brand new ZT model, and like I said in my review, if you want to see the full actual review of this knife, I did one on Friday, so you can check that out. In a lot of ways is ZT's, in my opinion, it seems like ZT's answer to everybody, or a lot of people going, can you please like make a knife, you know, that's more, you know, that better resembles the really, you know, the knives that we really like that used to make that were big and overbuilt and aggressive, right? And they did that, but they kept, you know, some refinements, some obvious things that needed to be a part of the design, like a blade that can actually cut, right? Some things like that. But when I first saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like a super refined, you know, it's like a supercharged version and a more aerodynamic version of the ZT-0300 series knives, or in this case, the 0303. This is my buddy Greg's, who very fortunately still has it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to make this comparison. And then this knife was provided to me by Scott Whittington at USA Made Blade. I know that there are a lot of old school ZT fans who have this knife, or perhaps you don't have this knife, but you just enjoyed Zero Tolerance for some of its more overbuilt models, right? This is definitely one of ZT's most overbuilt knives. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this 0308 is also definitely one of the biggest, baddest knives that ZT has ever made. So to me, considering the overall profile and some similarities in texturing, blade profile, stuff like that, it seems obvious to me to make this comparison, even though this is discontinued, right? If you own this knife and you're wondering, you know, would I like this one, or you know, you just like overbuilt knives, you've always thought maybe this is an interesting model, right? That's why. So we're going to compare a whole bunch of stuff. First off, let's go ahead and do measurements between the two, so you guys know kind of what you're looking at here. The overall length of the 0303, let me turn my tape measure the correct way. That's probably useful for everybody. Just over 8.5 inches. It's probably about 8.6 inches overall, whereas this guy is about 8.85 inches overall. The blade length on the 0303 is coming in at, we're going to call that about 3.75. And then your cutting edge is also, well, the cutting edge is probably about 3.65. This guy's got a blade length of 3.85, and, you know, just considering where that point of the scale is, and the cutting edge is also 3.85. So you have a longer blade, a longer handle, longer overall, and more cutting edge on this guy. Absolutely. And then in terms of like handle height, this guy's a little bit taller. It's also a little bit taller in blade, as you can see there. I don't know that we need to measure it exactly, but it's very similar. In fact, in hand, the roominess on the handle between this guy and this guy is about the same. It's the excess in texturing and jimping that gives a different feeling for this guy. Let's go ahead and weigh them so that you guys kind of know here. I mean, in terms of thickness, like blade thickness, this guy looks like mega thick and aggressive, but the truth is that I think they're about almost exactly the same in terms of thickness. Give here. Yeah, this blade is ground differently, but at the spine, they are just about exactly the same. Let's see if I can line them up just right there. Yeah, it's the same thickness, 150, 155 thousandths. ZT's, you know, classic. That's just the blade thickness that they like on some of these more overbuilt models. Let's go ahead and weigh them. I weighed them both in my review of the 0308, but I'm going to go ahead and weigh them both again here. So here's the 0303, and it is an absolute dump truck of a knife weighing 8.25 ounces, right? But that's part of the charm of it. Oh, there's a lot of people, oh my gosh, it's way too heavy. I could never EDC that to my, you know, to my local martini bar. Well, yeah, no, don't. It's on purpose. It's not like they were like, whoops, it's huge. No, it's on purpose. This guy comes in a little less. It's still obviously heavy. It's actually over. I like to carry some bigger, heavier knives, right? But for my day-to-day, what I use a knife for, I kind of cap out around 6.5 ounces, which is a little bit heavier than my full-tie XM18, 3.5 inch. This guy is coming in at 7.5. In fact, I'm going to go ahead, 7.05, not 7.5, 7.05 ounces. Here it is, my full-tie XM18. It's about the heaviest knife that I carry day-to-day, 6.1 ounces. 6.17. This guy coming in at 7.05 is heavy, but an ounce and a quarter less than the 0303. So there's an improvement right there for somebody who's looking for a heavier knife, kind of likes the 0303. This guy's definitely a little bit more improved. I'm going to go ahead and say that the way that I look at this knife, it's like this guy makes me think of an H1 Hummer. That's an H1 or an H2, right? I'm probably more like an H2. Just big and thick and tanky and kind of a lot of unnecessary things, right? The H1 actually has some off-road features that make sense. The H2 is like wrapping luxury and off-road together in a package that doesn't make a lot of sense. This guy's still a Hummer, but it's like GMC's new electric Hummer that's got like 1,000 horsepower and has a whole bunch of performance parts of it that, while some elements may be unnecessary, it's got that cool factor, and it's certainly a more efficient and more precision-made, more refined product. Does that make sense? Again, go Google the new electric Hummer if you want to make sense of that analogy. Anyways, yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about the action. So this guy is assisted. This is the biggest assisted knife I've ever seen. It's kind of, it has its own charm, right? I wish that this wasn't assisted. That's always been something that's kind of bothered me because it has a torsion bar. And while there's nothing wrong with it if yours does this. Oh, so I'm going to do it now? There we go. Torsion bar rattles around a little bit in there. At some point, that torsion bar may break, and ZT's got an excellent warranty. These knives are US made. I have dealt with ZT's warranty a few times. Fortunately, not many times. It's part of the reason why I enjoy ZT knives. A good company, right, is one that, number one, has a great warranty, and number two, has a warranty that you don't have to use often. And considering how many ZT and Kershaw knives I've owned, I'm happy with my experience with them and how few times I've actually had to use it. It's really just been for broken pocket clips because I rub up against stuff, right? It's a weird, and like, I made it sound like I just rub up against things for no reason. The pocket clip catches things and it bends out or breaks or whatever, and I need a new screw or I need a new clip. Very good about that, right? So I can't remember the exact point that I was wanting to. Oh yeah, action. So this guy is your typical nearly free-falling flipper knife. I've talked about this. This is definitely more of a light switch knife. It's not push button. You'll get used to it. But this has got the assisted feature, which puts excess resistance right here, right? It's also a little pinchy in places. My wife pinched herself on this a couple of different times. If this part comes back here, this area right here, do not get your fingers up against those braces for the external stops, right? Get your finger in there or behind there. This jimping will actually pinch your finger in there, right? And you run the risk of that because there's a spring constantly trying to push this back out, which makes it a little bit more cumbersome and attention, necessary when you're putting it away. This guy is what we're used to. It's got a very heavy detent. You can see I actually slipped off of that because my fingers are used to doing a push button flip on some of my other titanium frame lock flippers that I've got right now. This is definitely, the angle of it is more of a light switch and you're gonna have to adapt to it. But it's close to what might be a double clutch, but it doesn't actually occur. So it's very easy to do this. The other thing that's nice is this area back here has no jimping, which this guy is covered. This is an absolute, this is a barbed wire lined trench, right? And inside the trench is hot lava and spinefish and cactuses and all that, right? You get, am I painting a picture? This is not comfortable to land on. Even though it's assisted, it's not comfortable to land on. This, I can do this all day. The only part that's going to wear out my finger after a while is the amount of detent strength flipping it. This is a better setup for flipping, absolutely. So it is a refinement in that area. Let's talk about the pivot. Both, you can use a socket wrench on this guy. It's got that old school ZT pivot. You can use that. It's I mean, I don't have a problem with it. A lot of people are like, oh, it's not Torx, I don't like it, and it sticks out. Okay, yeah, you're right, but it doesn't. Underneath here is sort of the hex head thing, so it's not free spinning. You can use a socket head. A lot of people looked at this guy and they said, oh no, proprietary hardware. Actually, the sides of this side are flat, which means you can just use a wrench. I don't know that it's any more or less convenient. I wouldn't call it inconvenient. I would call it less convenient than a Torx head. Both of these knives should, like, seriously, right here, that should just be a Torx. It should be a T10 or T8 Torx. That's just what it should be. However, it's fine. You can still adjust it. They do have this sort of secondary oval slot cut on the inside of the G10 and the frame, which prevents the pivot from being free spinning. So it's not necessarily an upgrade. I will say that it certainly looks nicer, but it's just as convenient or inconvenient to adjust it however you want to look at it. I don't think that it's that big of a deal. This knife has a hole here. Some people look at that and go, ah, that really bothers me. I don't make a gigantic deal out of it. I have no idea why people are making a big deal out of that hole. It's just a hole. I kind of like how it looks. I'm going to move on from it because I just don't care. The jimping on the back of this blade is much better. This is a little bit unnecessary and crazy and aggressive. This is going to catch your finger just fine, whether wearing gloves or not. And it doesn't need to be here, and it's not. Whoops, just bumped the camera. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's wonderful. Since we're moving into the blade, let's go ahead and talk about the blades here. On this guy, we have a flat that runs about 75% of the blade. It's a pretty thick or wide or tall flat. We have a recurve, and despite all this room to drop towards the cutting edge, it is very, very thick. This knife definitely emphasizes strength, or blade strength, over cutting performance. It is a recurve, and you gain the benefit on that recurve of the, excuse me, let me readjust my camera here. I'm bending down and realizing that I have sunk a little bit because I leaned into it, but rubbed up against it, right? But anyways, you do gain the benefit of a recurve that you can sort of start the material here and drag it through. And there's not really anything in the cutting path. I mean, even the thumb stud. On this guy, though, it is substantially more performance-oriented. It's the same thickness, but the flat only carries out to about here, and then this line here is just carrying the rest of the thickness. But you have a lot of room to drop, and it gets much, much thinner behind the cutting edge. I don't know if I can actually sort of give you guys an example of that. I don't want these two to touch, but so here's this guy, and then here is this guy. This guy is much thinner behind the edge. There's absolutely nothing in the cutting path. It's all belly. I mean, this knife rivals the cutting performance of blades that are much smaller and much thinner just because of the way that it's ground. I mean, that thing really tapers down to a nice, clean, thin edge, and it's sharpened beautifully. Just, oh, the refinement on that blade is wonderful. And they still managed to make it ergonomic and good looking, right? They nailed it. Absolutely. I mean, if this is if we're asking the question, is this blade a direct evolution of this blade? If this is meant to be a better version, just for those people wondering, is this a better version of this? I'm going to say yes. This blade is head and shoulders above this one. This knife still has its charm, and I still love it. But I'm just, I'm trying to kind of let you guys know. It's like, well, I like this knife, but I've kind of found that it's big and clunky, and it doesn't cut the best, right? Well, that blade is going to make you a lot happier. Another thing that I like is this area back here that's been cut out a little bit. It makes this flipper tab, while it's not obtrusive and not prominent, it makes it even less prominent in the pocket because it's been cut out. You can imagine here if the material just continued and then you had the pocket clip sticking out from here, it'd be a little bit more obtrusive, but it's not. So that's kind of nice. All of this hardware is T8. All the hardware on this guy is T8. There's no real difference there. They both have positions to mount the clip on the left-hand side, so that's nice. This knife actually has tip up, tip down, left or right-handed carry, which I think is not... I mean, if you carry your knife tip down and it's a flipper, okay, this is not a... Greg has it mounted like this. Greg, if you're watching this, I'd change it because this knife especially has a chance of going off in your pocket if that flipper tab is up against the back seam like this, right? And if it opens up this much... and then you decide to do some parkour or something, then you might end up with the tip of that knife in your leg. But he's probably not doing parkour. So, but anyways, that's why I don't like that. the point is that this knife has, in my opinion, the correct mountable positions for the pocket clip. Tip up, right or left-handed carry, even though it is a right-handed frame lock. The pocket clip on this guy is okay. It will hold on to your pants. It's not the best thing in the world. It's not super deep carry. I wouldn't necessarily call it shallow carry. This pocket clip, there's a little more pocket clip. Again, it's not my favorite pocket clip in the world, but it's going to do the job. I really like the titanium lock sides of both of these knives. They're very similar. This one's got the black DLC on it. This one has this sort of matte yet semi-reflective finish. This is beautiful. I love this. It's very, very nice to look at. Both knives are slightly contoured, and they both fill the hand incredibly well. I'm locked into both of these knives. It feels nice to dual wield these, right? If you're wondering, does that feel cool to dual wield them? Yeah, it does. Yeah, they both fill the hand out well. Very confident. There's an emphasis on comfort with this guy because it's not lined with cactus needles or this excess unnecessary jimping, right? Which is just all over the place. But yeah, that's a thing here, and it's not a thing here. The lines on this knife will lock you in. You don't need the unnecessary jimping. This is very, very comfortable, and the pocket clip does not create a hot spot. Both of these knives lock up absolutely solid. This has external stops, which is always something that I prefer, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary because they're both solid. Neither of these knives, even though this is an older one, and some people are going to ask, does this have lock geometry issues? No. It doesn't have lock geometry issues. Greg is not going to mind if I do that with his. I know you guys probably want me to do it with this one. I'm not going to because it's a brand new knife. But I'll let you look at the geometry here. You can see there's plenty of surface contact. The angle's not super duper sharp, right? And I did it in the video of the review. There's no movement in that whatsoever, right? Very smooth, perfectly centered. This guy is still centered, something I love about ZT knives. Greg has never had to adjust that. It's just beautiful. So the main benefits here, this is a more comfortable knife. It's got a more thinly ground blade. It's got a blade that's going to better emphasize cutting performance. Another thing that we didn't talk about, this is CPM 20 CV steel. You can see right there. This is S30V. There's nothing wrong with S30V, but you know, for what you're going to pay for this knife, this one's discontinued. For what you're going to pay for this knife, which I talked about in the review if you want to go watch that, it's a little bit more expensive than what this guy was when it was brand new. I have no idea what these go for on the secondary market now because they're discontinued, so the prices are all over the place. For what you're going to pay, you're going to be happy that that's CPM 20 CV. It's one of the very best steels out there. A lot of people like it. So that is what I would consider a benefit, considering how this is ground. It's ground to cut. It's ground to cut efficiently, so you would want a blade that's going to emphasize cutting performance. And it's thick enough in the right places where you still get the toughness you would want from a knife like this, right? So anyways, the knife, it does not have a torsion bar. It's not assisted, so there's a benefit there. It's a little bit easier to manipulate because you're not having to work against a spring. Better cutting performance, better steel. Not necessarily better ergonomics, but more comfortable because it's not lined with jimping. And was there anything else other than that? Oh, the excess shouldering there is also nice. There's a lot of shouldering wrapped around the stop pin. That's going to help out with the life of the lock bar. And then other than that, weight. It's not, I mean, it's still a big knife, but it's an ounce and a quarter less. And it also is not going to take up as much room in terms of height and just the amount of bitey stuff hanging off the knife, right? It's not going to be as cumbersome in the pocket if you're already used to carrying a knife like this. So, I mean, I think in as many ways as were necessary, right? ZT or not necessarily recreated, but they created a knife that was definitely a nod to this guy, right? And this was a wildly popular knife, and I don't think anybody is pretending that while this knife is certainly a durable and dependable tool, I don't think anybody was pretending that this knife gained them some sort of specific advantage in terms of utility or cutting performance over the endless options that we have today. And I'm certainly not saying that either, right? They created a knife that was a nod to that, but they gave it a whole bunch of necessary upgrades to meet the demands of, people in today's knife market that some of us might look at ZT and go, I love ZT's overbuilt, big, crazy aggressive knives, but I've kind of realized after buying knives for a few years that I do like a blade that actually cuts. I like it to feel as premium as the price, right? But I like the little refinements. I don't like it being uncomfortable in my hand. I don't want it to be a sore. I don't want it to be overly cumbersome in the pocket. And, you know, given what they had to work with, right, with it being a nod to this design, they kind of shrunk it down a little bit and they made it just a better performer all the way around. So, I mean, obviously, you guys probably could have guessed this from the beginning. This is obvious. This is a better knife. Definitely. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's a pretty darn good knife. I mean, if you're looking for a big knife, right, this is going to be, if you're looking for a big knife and you don't mind a little bit of excess weight, this guy's got some pretty decent ratios, right? It's definitely got a performance-oriented blade. It's going to bring you the joy of carrying something that feels big and aggressive and durable. It's going to feel like old school ZT, and it's got awesome materials. So yeah, you know, for those people looking for specifically that, then yes. If you're looking for a knife that's got the very best ratios in terms of cutting edge to overall length and weight ratio, that's got all the little tiny immaculate precision details and the balances exact. If you're there, then you're not going to gain anything from this video. I'm not trying to sell you this knife or convince you to buy this knife. This is really just a direct comparison between these two. There was something else that I wanted to add in there, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But I think that's going to be pretty much everything that I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I will give one more to this guy, and this is only temporary. If you're watching this 2 years in the future, then this likely is not the case anymore. As of right now, the only configuration you can get this guy in is Coyote and Tumbled. Coyote's not my favorite color. Some other people might like it. I would have much preferred this to be black. I am dead sure that they will eventually release this knife with a black scale. It will not surprise me at all if they release it in a configuration that looks exactly like this, with the tiger stripe blade and the black scale. I think that'd look pretty cool. I'd really like to see this thing in all tie. They did it with the 0562, but I can tell you right now it's going to be massively expensive. This is already an expensive knife, even by, you know, today's standard, you know, what we expect for the materials. It's already an expensive knife, and you know, I said it's a little bit higher than where I would have liked it to see. It's not crazy, but it's just a little bit higher. If you do full tie, it's definitely going to get up there. So there's another thing I'll give. But all the way around, this is a better knife. This is an awesome knife. Big applaud to ZT. Thank you so much for doing this. Please, more stuff like this in the future. You don't have to pull completely away from some of the smaller models, some of the weird things, and you know, that's fine, because there is a market for some of that stuff, and some people really like it, and some people hate this part of ZT, but there's a bunch of us who are just like, oh, thank you, please. This is a huge step in the right direction. So this was awesome. This was fun to do. This was one of the, you know, really, really enjoyable comparisons to do on this channel. So thanks again, Scott Whittington, for lending me the 0308. Check out USA Made Blade, please. And thanks again, Greg, for lending me the 0303. I hope I didn't make you not love this guy. That's going to be pretty much it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.